drop the microphone, that's a deal.
Yeah, the mic drop. The millennial mic drop that I don't understand at all. Namaste. Namaste.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Nama.
Stay. Nama and stay. So, hey, how about that Lazarus? I would like to talk to you about X-rated spirituality in a different way than I've talked about it before, but perhaps we should review. So, in the, X, I have to explain my art, rated spirituality. Because X-rated gets attention, even though it has nothing to do with what I'm talking about. In classical Hindu understanding, there are 4 yogas, 4 ways of approaching spirituality. And I actually want to start here with devotion. Or another way to talk about devotion that's kind of awful, isn't it? That's a little better. I wish I could draw an anatomically correct heart. You know, there's a bar or a restaurant called El Corazon, and it's got a sign as an anatomically correct heart. Would you go in there and eat? I don't know. Anyway.
The food's good, I've been there.
Is it good?
Yeah.
Well, you know, they say gizzards and hearts. So, devotional spirituality, bhakti yoga in Hinduism is, you might say it's a spirituality of the heart. I chose the opening and closing songs today because they're chants, which are the property, if you will, of devotional spirituality. It seeks another way to look at this. Is spirituality, probably this is too light, of the affective, the emotions, the I love Jesus. It's the spirituality, it's the arms in the air, you know. And at one time, it's probably before all your time, somebody shared something with our clergy group. This person's a little more charismatic, and he was a member of this group, and it was a picture, they're all standing there like this, and I commented, my God, somebody's robbing those people, call the police. But it is that charismatic sort of heartfelt thing.
I take it that's not your style of devotion.
Well, we'll get to that a little bit, because I recognize that I need it. Now, across from that, I have sort of the antithesis, which is Jnana Yoga study. Bible study, biblical scholarship, study of the tradition, in a Christian sense, historical Jesus. You might say this one, watch this now. Is the spirituality of the head. And I position it at the other end of the spirituality of the heart because they're kind of an antithesis. Although there's disagreement to a certain extent between all 4. This says, if I read enough, if I learn enough, if I think enough, I'll get to God. This one is meditation and contemplation, but and it's Raja Yoga in the, is what the Hindus call it. But this word doesn't mean meditation or contemplation. What it means is practice. So, in a way, it might be better to say, although devotion probably more properly includes worship, there's a sense in which going to daily Mass is Raja Yoga. Having a meditation practice is Raja Yoga. Having a crochet practice is Raja Yoga. It's an activity related to my spiritual path. And then last but not least, there's karma yoga, which is all about service. It's a shame she's not here because Debbie is all about this. I mean, she went to Nepal and was there during the earthquake. She volunteers for the Red Cross. These are the people who hang out at the soup kitchen. But there are also people who, for example, the word chaperone stuck in my head and it's not what I want. Companion, that's what I want. Companion people in the hospital, perhaps as they're dying. It's so this one, if I was going to give it something, what?
Okay.
This is the spirituality of the feet. It's doing. It's moving. And this one, I'm going to do this. This one is the spirituality of the butt. It tends to be mostly engaged sitting down. Or it could be standing up, but it's, stationary. And something came to me this week that is why I kind of really wanted to go this way. And I wrote about it, and I'll just share it with you, even though you might not like it all. What if it's all just a cultural way of expressing spiritual truth, and little, if any, should be taken literally? I'm referring to the stories. What if no matter the names assigned to the characters, except the historical ones, of course, the source is the same? Call it God, call it the universe, call it Dharma, even call it karma. Think about that. It's all a description of an understanding of how things work. I think, but I'm not absolutely sure how it would all play out, that such a reality would impact the value of jnana yoga vis-a-vis topics such as the historical Jesus and other similar pursuits of what really happened, because the truth, the reality, the point, and even what really happened all lie underneath the story. The story conveys the truth as a train conveys passengers, but the story isn't the truth any more than train is the passengers. We need the story to bring truth to us, but once we have it, we can let the story go and or establish a new relationship to and with it, because it has done its job. We wouldn't tell the airplane that brought our family members for a visit that it couldn't leave or get repairs once our family had deplaned. So why are we so attached to the story, except as a practice method, of course? So it occurred to me that all of this applies to Lazarus. If we look at Lazarus from this perspective, from the head, we're going to ask ourselves one set of questions. Did it really happen? Is it historically true? What can we learn about the culture that surrounded Lazarus? What about Mary and Martha? Is Mary Mary Magdalene or another Mary? Is this the same Mary and Martha that were at the house when Jesus showed up and Martha wanted Mary to cook? These people say, I don't care about any of that. I will approach Lazarus from the perspective of perhaps the emotional charge to the story, how those people must have felt, how Jesus felt, why Jesus wept. Interestingly, this translation has it a little longer. In the RSV, that's the shortest verse in the Bible. It's Jesus wept, period. Not Jesus began to weep. I think somebody wanted to hedge the bet and come up with a shorter one for their trivia night. But it's all about what would it feel like to be Lazarus? How did he feel when he came out of the tomb? This guy's going, how did he find his way out of the tomb? His face was all wrapped in claws. This person's going, Lazarus was dead. What would it be like to accompany people dying? To work with the dying? To work with people in grief? To work with people in panic? How could I help if I came across a situation like this? This person's going, what can I learn about how Jesus responded to this? He waited to go. Can I learn something about that? About the value of waiting? About the need not to rush into things? About Jesus just sitting with that? This person might look at that same question and say, you know, when I'm helping other people, maybe there's times I need to not just jump right in. Maybe there's times people need to figure it out for themselves. Maybe if I keep throwing my child a life jacket at the swimming lesson, she's never going to learn to swim. And so maybe there's a sense in which waiting, what can appear to be neglect, is actually helpful. And what I want to say are two things. Traditionally, what I would tell you about this is that if you're in one of these quadrants as your primary perspective, the odds are the one that is your least accessed perspective is across the line from. Not absolutely necessarily the case, but probably. If you're into practice, you're probably don't have as much time for service, and if you're doing a lot of service, you don't have a lot of time for practice. If you're in your head, you're not in your heart. If you're in your heart, you're not in your head. And that's both okay, because we are who we are, but it also tells us where growth is. And I think there's also a change that occurs here in phases of life. As we age, this one gets harder, because physically it's harder to get there. It has to take on different forms. But we also recognize that the opportunity for growth, like for me, is across this axis. Or if you're up here, your opportunity for growth is this way. But I think this is a tool that we can use with any scripture from any tradition to come at it, or even folk stories. How do we come at it from different angles to understand it more fully? If I look at a story and can't decide what in the world it's calling me to do or learn because I'm looking at it because I'm studying it historically, maybe I need to try a different perspective. Maybe the value in the story for me is over here. And insisting that only one way works is like saying the train is the passengers. If we're honest and we want to go to Chicago, we can take the train, we can drive, we can grab a Greyhound, we could even fly if we really had money we just wanted to throw around and spend more time checking in than we actually did in the air. I suppose you could, take a boat, putter out, and go down on Lake Michigan. But in the end, we'd still be in Chicago. And how we got there would be less important than the fact that we had arrived. And so I think whether our thing is sitting in the corner thumbing our beads, pulling out the latest scripture commentary to figure out what people are saying, trying to discern how we might take what we learn in the story and use it to help others, or how we can get in there with our heart and through accessing affective things and devotion, perhaps feed and grow our compassion. And I don't think that matters whether we're talking about Lazarus or the creation story or the Bhagavad Gita or even a really good movie. I mean, you could look at a really good movie that had a really good story and pick it apart in this way and decide what to draw from. The challenge is that, of course, whatever it is we like the most, we can find people who will say this is the only way to go about it. But it's just not true. It's just not true. People, even very different from us, even those people who repeatedly volunteer to get held up at their church meetings, to raise their hands, they're getting there, whether it's my way to get there or not. And as we move towards a world where everybody gets along, or at least tolerates one another, I think this is one of the things we need to open to. Or as somebody once said, different strokes for different folks. Yes? no?
I have a question. In the Hindu perspective, would practice mean primarily silence, in a...
Well, the chant can be a practice. It's a devotional practice, but it is a practice. Krishna Das often says, find out, and I'm paraphrasing now, but find out what it is that you like to do and do it. That can be your practice, and it doesn't really matter whether it's crochet. The difference would be, I think, if you're over here, you're not going to get to what I call the secondary definition of either of these, which is, the thinking part. Discursive meditation is not a devotional practice. Chanting is. Following the breath isn't really a devotional practice. It's a practice. So there's some bleed over, to be sure.
Well, and I'm trying to clarify, but it sounds like it's not the case, that one of the arms of the X is specifically a practice that detaches from thought or feeling, a mindfulness thing.
You could maybe make an argument that if you would draw a horizontal line, that these would tend to be, I don't want to say passive, but as opposed to active, less active. And these would be more active, whether intellectually or physically. And they'd also be more, and maybe, no, you can't do that, can you? I think most often, even though chanting is a devotional practice, that these do, that generally speaking, Raja Yoga is more detached. I mean, chanting, because it accesses the heart more, it's hard to say it's detached. But it's certainly, that, I often thought, I was thinking the other day about doing this, and, what if we put God there? And so they're all going to lead you to God. So in that sense, they all have a lot in common.
Now, really dumb question is, my first exposure to yoga was,
Right, composing,
yeah,
which is this.
that's Raja Yoga?
Yeah,
Okay.
even though it's physical. Ram Dass was told by his guru, tell the truth and love everybody. Okay, that's devotional practice. And he said, the truth is, I don't love everybody. And his guru got nose to nose with him and said, tell the truth and love it. And probably the working out of that balance has to bring some of this into it. How, if the truth is that I find you really offensive, how do I love you now? And I think that maybe comes to this. And maybe the way that I end up loving you is by serving you in some way. But it's, I know for me, like those, but I also know that there have been people who have been extremely spiritually advanced who have done it that way. So that's a practice point for me too. How do I, help them up that I've seen midgets grow? is sort of an extreme example of this. That wow,
I would think for you that perhaps Ignatian type style meditation, where you try to insert yourself in the story and imaginatively, that could be a way that you would get to something effective.
It could be. I struggle with that. Not because it's not valid. I mean, I think Ignatian spirituality is great. I think for me, what I have to, what helps me here is the chant and the music and the, getting me to this, gets me to this place. And there is something magical, but mystical about these historic mantras that have an impact just because of the tones. That absolutely is contrary to this kind of, you know, what do you mean the sounds impact the change? But I've seen it in myself, so I can't deny it. And I think we can do this same thing with the Easter story coming up. So if, for example, was it last week when we were talking about the Annunciation, if I come to the Annunciation here and say, well, I'm not so sure it really happened, it doesn't mean that over here it didn't happen. You know, that it isn't a useful story as a devotional tool and what it must have felt like to be there. It's, our access points will be different. Or this one. Here. Yo-yo.
Oh,